A very good day to you. I hope you're having yourself an amazing day. It's yet another beautiful Thursday night that we are here to look at, of course, everything that was happening throughout the whole of Africa, what was making the headlines, and what theatrics were we getting served, of course, from all the corners of Africa. So we're going to be looking at majorly the South Africa's election is what has been hitting the headlines in Africa for this week, and it is going to continue hitting the headlines for the remainder of the week, of course, because, South Africa being one of the most developed African countries, and of course, the election there is but a big story in Africa. So we're gonna be looking at how early results have started tickling in, and the ruling ANC looks like it is gonna lose so far, according to how the results are looking. It's not looking good for Ramaphosa and ANC. It looks like a historical moment for South Africa, historical in that it's the first time that ANC has lost. If the results continue as they are tickling in, it will be the first time ANC has lost the seat since South Africa became independent in the 90s. So looks like it's headed that way so far. Mark the word so far, because all the results and have not yet tickled in. But as of now, the ANC is below 50%, and it's falling short of majority. So that is South Africa. That is our main focus. We're going to be looking at that. We're going to be looking at Kenya with William Ruto now coming out to say, I know Maria and Seth were talking about this. They're talking about Ruto's 1.5 million jet. So Ruto has come out to say that some friends helped him pay for the private jet for the US trip. It actually costed less than 10 million, that is less than 100,000 USD. Chartering the Dreamliner costed less than, it actually costed him 73,000 USD. That is what he has now come out to claim. The remainder of the cost was catered for by friends. In Nigeria, Nigerians are not believing what happened. So Nigeria is a country of theatrics. To be honest, it's always full of theatrics. It's always full of dramas. So Nigerians woke up, and the parliament passed a new national anthem, did away with the old, and passed a new one without the people knowing anything. And that is not even the first time. What is angering Nigerians is that the new national anthem was written by Briton. So it had an old national anthem that it has been using since 1978. But lawmakers woke up, passed a law, and replaced the current one with another version. And the new version was written by a Briton. It wasn't even written by a Nigerian. It was written by a Briton by the name, I'm going to be telling you the name. Her name is Lillian Jeans Williams. Yep. So we're going to be talking about Nigeria, of course. Also going to be looking at Egypt and how, as Kenya was looking to the west, Egypt was looking to the east, with the Egyptian Prime Minister meeting. It's actually the Egyptian president. His name is Ahmed El-Sisi, meeting with the Chinese president Xi Jinping in Beijing to discuss a lot of things. I'm going to be telling you why Egypt is leaning to the east, and what had El-Sisi going to do in Beijing. But of course, our main focus will be the South Africa's election. We are also going to be looking at the Kenyan mountain climber Kirui Cheruyot, who died as he was trying to scale the Everest. He was actually able to scale it. He was shot by about 68 meters when he died, and how his family has now decided it's too expensive to retrieve the body, and they're going to leave the body there as so many other bodies in the Everest. So they had hopes of bringing the body back to Kenya for burial. But of course, the family has now decided that the body is going to be left there. And they say they're going to let Kirui rest with the mountains, of course, because it's too expensive and it's too dangerous to retrieve the body. Are also going to be looking at how the US has blacklisted, among other people, the Ugandan speaker. Her name is Anita, over corruption. So the Ugandan speaker Anita cannot step a feet in the US. She was blacklisted, and they said that she was too corrupt. Was she really? We're gonna look at that. So join me for the next 30 minutes as we look at each and everything that was hitting the headlines in Africa. And let us start with South Africa. As I told you, results have started tickling in. And let me tell you an interesting fact about this year's ANC election. It was more of a vote of defiance. So South Africans were either voting for or against ANC. That was, they were not, if somebody voted for Malema, it was because they wanted to have Malema. I mean, somebody voted for Malema affiliated MPs, because in South Africa, as I told you, they don't vote for the president, they vote for the parliamentarians, and the majority parliamentarians are the ones who the majority party is gonna select, appoint the president, who of course has to be a parliamentarian. So it looks like in South Africa, everybody was either voting for or against ANC. Either you're supporting ANC or you are sick and tired of ANC. And majority of South Africans are the one who are sick and tired of A.N.C. So it looks like the 3-decade dominance of the African National Congress, which has led South Africa ever since they came out of apartheid in 1994, might come to an end. Elections have started trickling in. So ANC has had 6 successive national elections. That is since 1994, they've had 6 elections. ANC has won all of them, winning by 57.5% in the last national election. 70, it has always been, it's the first time ANC has really lost popularity. And I gave you the reasons for this. South Africans are sick and tired because, one, unemployment in South Africa is at its highest, especially among the black community. They are poor, unemployed. There's so much corruption going on. South Africa is the country that we are talking about, the speaker being bribed with a wig. Yep. It is a country that there is so much disparity between the poor and the rich. You're going to look at South Africa in the white side, the side of the high side, and you look at the low side, and you can't believe it's the same country. I mean, in as much as we have disparities in many countries, the one in South Africa might be worse, because the gap between the rich and the poor in South Africa is really wide, and looks like South Africans have had enough. So very early counts in South Africa's national election are putting ANC at just over 42% of the vote. So at 42%, you cannot be the majority, of course. So early votes are raising the possibility that ANC might lose its majority for the first time since it took power in 1994, because you need to be above 50% for you to be the majority. But so far, only 16% of the votes have been counted and declared. That is why I said very early counts. So it's just but a partial picture of Wednesday's election. So if the results remain the same, they could bring the biggest political shift in South Africa, because, as I said, it is the first time ANC has been defeated. So for one, looks like there was even an increased voter turnout, because the Electoral Commission was projecting 70% voter turnout in this election from the 66% in the last national election, where the ANC won with 57.5% of the vote. But it looks like the turnout even exceeded the expectation that the Electoral Commission had put in place. So that's why I said it looks like it is a vote of vengeance in South Africa. People are voting either for or against ANC, because that's why you're even seeing the voter turnout even going above what the Electoral Commission had projected, with the last election having a 70% voter turnout, a 66% voter turnout, and this time it even going higher than that. So the counting process is going on. The results that have been declared so far are from less than 4,000 of the total 23,000 polling stations across the 9 provinces that make up South Africa. So there's still a long way because um, 28 million people were registered to vote in South Africa. South Africa is not a big country, it's just a country of 62 million people. So 28 million had registered to vote. So we're gonna see whether ANC, as I said, it is very, very early, but the early results do not look good on ANC from the 20 from the 4,000 polling stations that have been declared out of the 23,000. It's still a big number of polling stations. So, but it's not looking good for ANC so far with Ramaphosa. So, what does that leave us with? If if ANC loses the majority, then it will now be left for two parties. Two major parties that are now remaining are the EFF, that is led by Julius Malema. It is called the Economic Freedom Fighters. You know them because they wear red. And the Democratic Alliance. But it is not looking so good for Malema and the EFF because so far from the results, he is at 8%. 8% is a bit low. And I was telling Keith, Jacob Zuma, in as much as he's corrupt and everything, he is very corrupt. One of the most corrupt leaders you're ever gonna see. He has a way of resonating with the poor. He has a way of making the poor believe he is their Robin Hood. He is there to save them. And it worked because he is the one who's giving Ramaphosa a hard time. So he made up a party. It's not even an old party, not even and the party is doing so well. It it's clenched quite a good percentage, although the white-led Democratic Alliance is at 25%. So, as I told you, the voter turnout was really big in South Africa this year, to a point that the Electoral Commission had to extend the voting hours. Polls were supposed to close at 9 p.m., but they continued for many hours in many places because one, there was late in ballot being cast, and two, there was quite a turnout in South Africa's election this time. So, whoever is going to be the next president might not be Cyril Ramaphosa if the results that are trickling in are something to stand by. But as I said, that is a very small percentage of the total votes cast. Only 4,000 of the 23,000 polling stations, so it's still quite a small number. It's just 16% of the votes that have been counted so far as of 3 hours ago, as of 4 p.m. They had only declared 16% of the votes. But as I said, it is not looking good for ANC. But we're gonna see. We're gonna see what is gonna happen. Whether this vote of defiance, where people are not voting for anybody, they're just voting against the ANC. We're gonna see whether this vote of defiance is gonna win or Ramaphosa is gonna have another term in office. So that is South Africa with the elections. That is, of course, what has been making headlines this week. And coming back to Kenya, I know Maria and said we're talking about Ruto's 1.5 billion jet luxury jet that he procured chartered in order to go to the US. So he has come out to say that he did not actually pay 1.5 million Kenya shillings for the jet, 1.5 million USD for the jet. He only used 73,000 USD. That is 10 million Kenya shillings. So he's saying the trip to the US costed the country only 73,000. Why? Because he was offered a discounted rate by some friends. So he's saying that he has friends at the Emirati airliner who offered him a discount in the chartered plane that he chartered, the chartered private plane, and he only paid 73,000 Kenya shillings. So he rejected claims that the trip costed 1.5 million Kenya shillings, calling them exaggerated. So he was speaking at the National Power Breakfast in Nairobi today, where he said that he will not and would never and can never waste taxpayers' money. So this is after his 3 days official visit to the US, where he secured investment deals worth billions of dollars. And whether the dollars are really going to impact Kenyans, we already know the answer. But that was him claiming that the jet actually costed him only 73,000 because he had friends who gave him a discounted invoice for the chartered Emirati plane. In Nigeria, as I told you, Nigerians woke up to shock and they realized that their parliament, the lawmakers, did away with the old anthem and came up with a new one. So Nigeria adopted a new national anthem yesterday after lawmakers passed a law that replaced the current one with another version. So Nigerians are really mad and they are criticizing the new anthem. Why? One, nobody told them about anything. They just woke up and found a new national anthem. But that was even the issue. What is making Nigerians mad is that their new national anthem was written by a Briton. So their old one was called Arise, O Compatriots, which has been in use since 1978 when it was introduced by the military government. The anthem was composed at a time when Nigeria was going through deadly civil war, and it's called on Nigerians to. There's a line that says, "Sir, we have to serve our fatherland with love and strength, and to not let the labor of our heroes be in vain." However, there is a new version which was now passed by the parliament. That was written by a British composer. Her name is Lillian Jean Williams. So the new anthem was played publicly for the first time at the legislative session that was attended by Tinubu, who was marking his first year in office. So Nigerians are not happy with that, and they took to social media to protest the new anthem. They're not having it. So one of them was saying, I'm looking at a tweet by one of them, and he's saying, in a 21st century Nigeria, the country's political class found a colonial national anthem that has pejorative words like native land and tribes to be admirable admirable enough to foist on our citizens without their consent. So they're questioning how the government could introduce a new national anthem written by their colonial masters and that has pejorative words like tribes, without even having public participation. You know, and an anthem is something that you recite everywhere in school every day. The least you can do is have it written by at least somebody from your country, because what do you mean? You hire Britain to write a national anthem for you to talk about patriotism for you. Doesn't make sense, but I remember it's Nigeria and I won't complain much. Nigeria doesn't shock me anymore. As Kenya's president was in the US trying to secure deals from the West, Egyptian President El-Sisi was in the East trying to secure deals from China. So he was in Beijing where he met China's President Xi Jinping. So they signed a lot of deals together, a lot of agreements talking about bilateral relations and bringing stability in the Middle East, especially the Israel-Hamas war. You know, Egypt is really invested in the Israel-Hamas war. So they, among other things, are going to collaborate in building roads and other infrastructure in Egypt. China reminded Egypt that it has invested billions of dollars in the economy, including the building of the Suez Canal Economic Zone and the building of the new administrative capital east of Cairo. So they signed deals worth around 14 billion, and that is every African country running to either east or west, which are the same people, but that is Egypt affiliating itself with China. Back to Kenya, there was a Kenyan mountain climber. His name is Kirui Cheruyot, who attempted to scale. He attempted to climb the Everest. He wanted to become in the first African ever to scale, to climb the Everest without supplemental oxygen. He was really close to doing it because he died just a few meters off. He fell just a few meters off. He was 48 meters below the summit point, below the peak. So Kirui, who is 40, was attempting to climb the Everest without supplementary oxygen when he fell 48 meters below the 8,849-meter peak. He died with his Nepali guide, and the Nepali guide has not been confirmed dead, but he's still missing. So you can't miss for a week on the Everest and still be alive. So the family had hopes of retrieving Kirui's body, but they have today released a statement saying that they have given up, and after evaluating the cost and the risk, it would be too risky and too costly to bring the body back home. So as I told you, Kirui was aiming to become the first African to reach the summit without supplementary extra oxygen. He was that close, only 48 meters to the summit point. So his family wrote on Twitter, Joshua loved the mountains and they loved him. We find comfort knowing that he's resting in his happy place. So the cost of retrieving his body is about 190,000 USD. And that is the reason why about 200 of the 330 climbers who have died on the Everest remain there. So only 130 have been able to be retrieved. One, as I told you, it is very expensive. $190,000 is what is required. Was required to rescue really was what was required to retrieve Kirui's body. And apart from the cost, it is also very risky. It is dangerous trying to rescue the body. One, because the body is as heavy as a rock. Two, they have to dig him up. Three, he died climbing, and now you're climbing to rescue him. You might also die trying to rescue him. So this season, 4 climbers died on the Everest, which is climbed in April and May when conditions are the best. So there was that summit that was going on, and 4 climbers died. Unfortunately, among the 4 climbers that died, one was the Kenyan Kirui, who is a banker, and he has climbed so many other mountains. Unfortunately, he was not lucky this time, and he lost his life. So basically, that was not a lot was happening in Africa today, apart from, of course, the South African election, which, as I've told you, early results are showing that A.N.C is falling below the 50% mark. Africa, in order for you to be able to be the president, you need to at least pass the 50%. You need to be the majority. And the A.N.C has never had a problem with that over the years. It is actually the first time that they look like they're gonna lose the seat, because it's theirs. They have been the one in power since 1994. In Papua New Guinea, there was a landslide that saw 2,000 people buried in the landslide, and Papua New Guinea did not know what to do, had to appeal to the UN, for help. So rescue operations have been underway by the United Nations because Papua New Guinea, like many African countries, did not know what to do. With people buried, they don't have an idea. How do you respond to such situations? The disaster preparedness in Africa is pathetic, non-existent. So Papua New Guinea reached out to the UN to help them rescue the people. 2,000 people had been buried. So far, 670 people have been confirmed dead. The 2,000 that were buried, 1,000 have been displaced. That was after a mass of boulders, earth, and splintered trees fell on Yambali, that is a remote highland near the mountains. So, even for the ones who've been rescued, they have not really received any help, and that is why the villagers are crying to the UN once again, because that's where they all run to offer emergency assistance, because the emergency response has been really down. The UN is reporting that 8,000 people might need to be evacuated from the area because of fear of another landslide. And as I told you, Guinea does not know what to do. Papua New Guinea does not have an idea, does not even have an inch of preparedness. So they know a second landslide might come. 8,000 people are in risk of getting buried again. But of course, they are also crying to the UN to come and help them evacuate the 8,000 other people. Papua New Guinea's government told the UN that it thinks that more than 2,000 people might be dead. The only assistance that they have gotten so far is from the UN and Australia. Wouldn't really call it assistance, but that is the only emergency response that is happening in Papua New Guinea right now, with, of course, the government not being prepared for anything, as is many other African countries. In Gaza, people are continuing to flee Rafah, as Israel is continuing to attack the city. So that lot of people are fleeing from the southern city of Rafah in the Gaza Strip, as Israel is deepening its offensive in southern Gaza. The situation is reported to be very, very scary, with Israel's military saying that it has seized control of a strategic corridor that runs along the length of Gaza's border with Egypt. And that was one of the reasons why Egyptian President El-Sisi had to go to China to discuss the Hamas, the Israel-Palestine war with Xi Jinping, because they had to go report to the masters what is happening. So the attacks in Rafah have intensified over the past couple of days, with the war, Israel's war on Gaza being reported to have killed about 36,000 people since it started. 36,000 is the number that has been reported. As you know, in war, most deaths go unreported, so the number might be higher than that. The number is higher than that. 36,000 people is the number that has been reported dead so far. That is Israel and Hamas and the Palestine war happening that side of the world, with the war going on. So basically, that was everything that was happening in Africa on a day where election results in South Africa have started kicking in, on a day where Papua New Guinea landslide people are fearing for a second landslide, with the government, of course, crying to the UN for help on a day where Gaza has Israel has intensified its attack on Gaza, on Rafah, on a day where Kenya's president has said that he did not procure a private jet for 1.5 million USD, but instead it only costed him 71 Kenya shillings because he received a special discount from friends who work in the Emirati company. On a day where Nigerians woke up to a new anthem written by a Briton. On a day where Egyptian President Fatal El-Sisi was in China to talk about, among other things, the Hamas war and how China is going to invest more funds in Egypt. It is also a day where the US has blacklisted a Ugandan speaker, the Ugandan speaker Anita, over what they said, over being overly corrupt. So she is not allowed to step into the US as she was blacklisted for being corrupt. On a day where Kenyan mountain climbers Kirui Cheruyot's family has said that he is not going to retrieve the body from the Everest, and they're gonna let him rest in the mountains because the cost of retrieving the body is too high and the operation is too risky. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. That was everything that was happening throughout the whole of Africa. I'll see you tomorrow. It's always a pleasure, ladies and gentlemen.